Hello and welcome to Todd Talk, where insight meets inspiration. I'm your host, Todd Hiller, and I'm an author, speaker, and longtime community leader, here to guide you on a journey towards fulfillment and balance. In every episode, we'll explore ways to fill life's emptiness, helping you uncover practical tools to create harmony, purpose, and happiness. Whether it's thriving in your career, nurturing personal growth, or simply finding joy in the everyday, Todd Talk is your space for real conversations and actionable advice. So let's thrive together, personally, professionally, and beyond. This is Todd Talk, and I'm thrilled to have you here. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Todd Talk. Thank you all so much for being here and listening. And today, this is our 11th episode, which means last week we celebrated 10 weeks of being a podcast and being a thing and talking to you all and talking to some other folks. And I am so excited for what the future will bring. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for the 10 weeks. For people who have been here from the beginning, thank you so much. I appreciate you more than I can even say. It's been a pleasure to have you hang out and listen, and I can't wait to see what the future holds. That being said, today we're going to dive right into the topic of emotions not being obstacles. All too often, we put a label on our emotions and we deem them as getting in the way. We sideline our feelings because we think that our emotions are going to prevent us from doing what we need to do. But emotions are part of us. We can't remove them from our lives or our hearts or our subconscious, so it's foolish to treat them as obstacles and think that we have to move them in order to be happy or productive or any list of things that we're trying to accomplish or attain. So instead of viewing them as obstacles, view them as, well, maybe the direction from which you want to approach any situation. When we feel sadness or frustration, anxiety, or even excitement, sometimes we tell ourselves, I need to push this aside so I can, get down to business and focus on what I need to do. We kind of compartmentalize or suppress or, sometimes we even ignore our emotions and we think that they're barriers between us and what we're trying to achieve or between us and our goals. But what if we shift this perspective? What if, instead of viewing emotions as roadblocks, we recognize them as valuable signs and really important messages that guide us rather than hinder us? Emotions exist for a reason, and we've talked about this. In the last episode, we talked about, you can't control your emotion. Your emotion is what you feel when something happens or when an opportunity presents itself or a good thing happens or a bad thing happens. The last episode, we talked about controlled reactions and how we can control the way we react to things, but we can't control that emotional response. They're part of our human experience. They're woven deeply into our biology, our psychology, and the way we interact with other people. And over the years, if you look at it from the evolution side of things, that's kind of how we learn to survive, is to trust our emotions and listen to the things that our emotions were trying to tell us to do or not to do. Looking back from our ancestors all the way up until now, fear warns us of danger. Anger signifies, it lets us know that something is wrong or we think there's an injustice or we have an unmet need. Sadness kind of slows us down and allows us to reflect on things and to heal, and then joy and excitement drive us towards those things we want. They help us connect and help us feel fulfilled. So emotions are not random. They are really deeply ingrained into us. And so I think we can look at them as kind of a bridge between our inner world and our external world, and they help us navigate experiences, relationships, and even the challenges or the difficult things that we face. So if we understand the role that emotions can play and they help appreciate their value rather than view them as obstacles, I think we can kind of unlock a whole new perspective on things. And we're going to go, the anthropology nerd in me is going to go kind of a little far back and a deep dive into this just a little bit. A long time ago, fear kept our ancestors alert for potential danger, and it triggered that fight or flight response that allowed them to escape predators or threats. Anger served as a defense mechanism. It helped them establish boundaries and protect valuable resources, the things they knew they needed to keep safe. Emotions like love and attachment, they ensured cooperation and social bonding and gave us the ability to increase our chances of survival in groups and make friends and protect ourselves as a group rather than just as an individual. And even all the way down to things like sadness and grief, that gave us a way to look for support from other people and to look for connection and, reinforce that community bond or that group feeling of being together. And without those things, we wouldn't have come as far as we did, or at least not as well as we have. And even if you fast forward now into modern life, see, it wasn't that deep of a dive. I told you it wasn't going to take too long. If we fast forward to modern life, these emotional responses still serve a central function. Do we have to run away from, wild animals now? No. Well, sometimes we do. But for the most part, we don't. So it looks a little different. But fear can still help us avoid reckless decisions, and anger can still help us feel motivated to stand up for ourselves and for others. So yes, it may be a little bit different, but those emotions still have that central line into us and play that really crucial role. I think one of the other things that we can look at is emotions also help us make decisions. We would all like to think that we make amazing decisions all on our own and we're just cruising along in this life and we know exactly what decision to make and exactly how to choose the correct thing every single time. But that's not always the case. Emotions give us they give us that pull and they provide some emotional weight that kind of goes behind our decisions. Sometimes you can certainly weigh the pros and cons of any situation and say, here's the good and here's the bad. But without the emotion, without the feeling part of it, you probably would just stand there and list the pros and cons for an hour and a half and not actually make a decision. So yes, we have rational thinking. Yes, we have pros and cons, but the emotion behind what drives us is the thing that helps us make a decision and hopefully make the right one or the one that works best for us. So in this instance, it's certainly not an obstacle. It's the thing that's going to help us get to the right choice. It's not something that's in the way. It's something that is there to help guide us towards the thing we want to pick, or maybe that we should pick, even if we're just standing there listing out the pros and cons. I think a good example of this is if we are presented with a choice. Say you're deciding whether to take a new job. Now, you look at the logic side of things and you say, well, the salary and the benefits are great. They look super appealing. I like them on paper. They're awesome. More money than I'm making now, better benefits than I have now. This looks great. But when you think about it, so that's the black and white of it. But then when you let your emotion kick in, you say, I really don't feel good about the interview. I don't think I like the company culture. I don't think I feel all that great about the work environment. I don't know how I actually feel about this. And in this case, that old saying, trust your gut, that emotional signal is really worth considering. The gut response you have, and we've talked about this before in other episodes, but that gut response, that's your emotional signal. That's your emotions, your emotional response in your body and your brain saying, hey, wait, you need to give this a second thought because it's not just all, sugar and lollipops and rainbows like it looks on paper. You need to give this some more consideration from an emotional perspective, because your gut response, your emotional reaction is, well, I think, how do I want to put this? It's a subconscious recognition of patterns or experiences that your normal rational mind might not immediately pick up on or immediately grasp. So you may love the benefits and the salary on paper, but the company culture and maybe the people say, your guts tells you maybe I don't want to do this. And that look at human relationships. If you don't know if you like the company culture or you don't like your coworkers or you think you won't get along with them, emotion also plays a really huge role in human relationships. That's the way we kind of connect with other people. Our ability to feel and express emotion allows us to bond with other people and to learn to trust them and have them trust us and develop those meaningful relationships. So think of how empty and how barren any of your friendships or relationships or whatever would be if you didn't allow emotion to get into them. If you just kind of walked into them as a legal contract between two people without the emotion, think of how awful that would be. So when we think of them as obstacles, please remember that sometimes we may think they get in the way, but without emotions, we wouldn't have lots of different things, and human connection would certainly be a lot different and very, very lacking if we just viewed the emotions as an obstacle and tried to push them out of the way instead of embracing them for what they are within our relationship and within our own minds and our own hearts, for that matter. One of the deepest forms of emotional connection, I think, is, things like love and empathy. And both of those things come along with a lot of nonverbal communication. And that nonverbal communication relies very heavily on emotion and emotional cues. We can understand if there's someone close to you in your life, a friend, a loved one, a spouse, whatever it is, very often we can understand how they feel based on their tone of voice, their facial expressions, their body language, and sometimes even more. We can understand those emotional cues even more than the words they can say, because sometimes they might not be forthcoming or being truthful because they're worried about how things are going to look. But we can pick up on those emotional cues, and those are such important things to be able to have within a relationship. And empathy is also really huge. That's our ability to feel and understand another person's emotions, and it helps create a deeper connection with people. So I don't ever want you to think, well, my empathy gets in the way. I'm an empathetic person, and that means I can't do X, Y, or Z. It's so important to be able to embrace your emotions and walk forward with the things they can help teach us and the things they can bring to our lives and our relationships and our emotional connections with other people. So don't think of them as barriers. I want you to get that right out of your mind. Don't think of them as something you have to move in order to get to your goal. Think of them as ways to embrace you as a person and kind of deepen your connection on lots of different levels. And on that note, and in that vein, think of, instead of obstacles, let's think of a different word, a better word for them. Kind of think of them as your internal GPS. Our emotions, yes, we really can't help the way we feel sometimes about things. We get feelings that pop right up in any given situation. But think of them as a way to guide you, because our emotions are always, always, always giving us cues about what is happening both within us and within our own minds and hearts, and also what's happening around us. I hear a lot of people talk about anxiety, and anxiety is a tricky thing, right? But sometimes anxiety can tell you that you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes people say, oh, well, my anxiety. I could talk for an entire 10 minutes about not calling it my anxiety and giving it a label because of how much power over you that gives it. But that's a different episode for a different time. But if you think of something like anxiety, yes, at first glance you might say, well, it's awful. I don't want to feel anxious. I don't like my anxiety because it makes me feel like I'm stepping outside my comfort zone. But guess what? You know what happens when we step outside our comfort zones? Growth. Individual growth, intellectual growth. When we feel uncomfortable, usually that's when change is happening, and so often change can be a really good thing. So think of all the things you've ever done where you say, oh man, I feel anxious about this. I don't know if it's going to be good. I'm a little worried. And then at the other side of it, you were so happy you went through with it because it was a good thing. It was an emotional growth. It was emotional change. It was something great that happened that you were able to walk through and work through. Think of that. So yes, the anxiety was there. And if you let it be a roadblock, you would have looked at it and said, oh, well, my anxiety won't let me do that because it's going to make me uncomfortable. I'm not even going to take the job interview. I'm not going to take the phone call. I'm not going to take the prospective client lunch, whatever it is. But sometimes it's a really good thing to signal that change is coming. And I think we can look at this type of evaluation of lots of different emotions. Frustration is another one. So you get frustrated with something and you say, oh my God, instead of shutting down, instead of saying, well, I'm so frustrated, this is just going to get in the way of everything, I'm not even going to put myself in this situation anymore. Frustration can reveal where boundaries need to be set, or where something in your life isn't aligning with your values or just isn't the way you want it to be. Now, I have another episode where I have said kindness without boundaries leads to unrealistic expectations and severe burnout. Actually, severe burnout is supposed to come first in that quote that I made up, but whatever, close enough. But so think of that. Think of how important it is. If you had just gotten frustrated with something and shut down and not gone any further and not explored it, you would have been in this really kind of ugly place where you were frustrated and shut down and you just walked away. But frustration can be a really good signal of, hey, listen, this frustrates me, so I need to create a boundary so this doesn't keep happening. Because if you just keep letting the situation present itself the same way, you will keep feeling frustrated. Even if you walk away, the situation's got to come back up again at some point if you don't set that boundary. So set that boundary. Let it be a good indicator that when you feel frustrated, you need to say, hey, right now, what's happening does not align with my values. Something's got to change. Something's got to give. I need to set a boundary and figure out a better way to handle this or a better way to walk through. And just as much as we need to set boundaries with things like frustration, excitement shows us what truly lights us up. right? It guides us towards our passion and the things we love, the things we get excited about are the things we should keep pursuing, even if it's a little bit difficult at first or even at second or third, right? If it's hard, do it hard. But if it excites you, keep going and keep pushing towards that because it is so beautiful and worth pursuing. Excitement is a great emotion to feel. Let it wash over you and then remember it and keep working towards those things. But so don't let don't let any of those emotions stand in your way. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more because I think, yes, we can say, well, we know what to do with these emotions when they present themselves and, how they can signal signs of growth or they can signal things we're excited about and the things we should keep pursuing or how to set boundaries. But what else does that mean when it comes to our personal growth? Like how do we embrace our emotions but also keep staying on the track we're on and not have to just bounce all over the place and try to navigate every single situation from this analytical point of view? And I think the way we do that is that instead of dismissing your emotions or treating them, like I said, like roadblocks, use them as a tool to reflect on what needs attention in your life. When you listen to your emotions and you listen to what your emotions are telling you or what your gut is kind of saying, I think we gain some really good insight into what is working in our lives and what isn't and where we might need some change. Emotions play a vital role in our personal development. Every challenging emotion, whether it's fear, sadness, disappointment, anger, whatever it is, they all offer that opportunity for growth. When we overcome fear, we build some resilience and courage. When we process sadness, it kind of deepens our understanding of loss, of love, and gratitude. And when you successfully navigate anger, it teaches us how to channel strong feelings into productive action. So rather than resisting emotions, embracing them can lead to some self-awareness, to some wisdom, and I really think can lead to some personal transformation. So the more we learn to work with our emotions instead of fighting against them, I think the more we can grow into the best version of ourselves by doing that and listening to our emotions. And it's definitely a balance. So why do we try to suppress emotions? Let's look at that. Why do we think we shouldn't give into that or we have to hold them, kind of at bay and we have to suppress them? And I think it's because we have this misconception that emotions hold us back. One of the biggest misconceptions, I think, is that emotions are irrational or unproductive. We think that, well, if we feel nervous before a big opportunity, that means we're not ready. If we feel overwhelmed, that means that we're not strong enough. And I talked about that a lot in the burnout episode. We feel overwhelmed and burned out. And sometimes that myth is people think, oh, well, I'm not strong enough to handle my commitments, and that's not necessarily the case. Or sometimes people think, well, I feel angry, so I must be out of control. That's not true. We are going to feel things no matter what, right? So those things we just mentioned, those are interpretations of your emotions. Nervousness can be a sign that we care so deeply about something, right? So, if I feel nervous before my job interview or before this big opportunity, it must mean that I'm not ready. No, it might mean you're perfectly ready, but you care about it so much. You are so hopeful that it goes well, that you do well, and you want to give it your all. That's okay. You can look at it from that side of the coin also, right? Feeling overwhelmed, yes, it can be a sign that we're, maybe walking towards something that's a pretty big deal, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not strong enough. It might just mean we need to approach it from a different angle, or we might need to, like I said before, set some boundaries. Burned out, overwhelmed doesn't mean you're a weak person. It just means you need to figure out how to get to a place where your boundaries are set and you're feeling emotionally well about things. And anger, I think anger is an emotion a lot of people struggle with because it doesn't feel good to be angry. I hate when I get angry. I hate feeling like I'm losing control. And I'm a really happy person. I have a super long fuse. I have a long temper. I don't get angry at much. I try to look at everything and find the goodness in it. But sometimes anger happens. We get triggered and anger shows up. But remember that anger can be a powerful force for change when you understand where it's coming from and you direct it properly. So I always say don't get angry at the, situation and just give up on it. Look at why you're angry and kind of figure out how that can guide you towards the best resolution possible. Understanding what about the situation is making you angry can help you understand what about the situation you would like to change going forward. And along those lines, I think, I used the word GPS before. I think, compass is another good word. Instead of pushing the emotions away, ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to tell me? What's it trying to get me to do? Where is it trying to direct me? And I think that when we take that into consideration and we think about what the emotion is trying to tell us, we get a really good pathway to the things we want to do and the ways we want to get there. Fear can reveal lots of things, but I think it can reveal what really matters to us. If we're afraid at failing at something, it means we care about it a lot. If you go out and you say that, well, you don't really have any attachment to this one thing, and you go out and you say, well, I went out and I tried and I failed. I'm not all that worried about it. I'm not scared to do it. I'm just, because if it doesn't go well, I don't care. But if you're worried or if you're fearful, sometimes that means you care about it really, really deeply. So don't see fear as always as a way to back away. Sometimes you can use it as a motivation to get more prepared and to find a way to grow. Now, if you're being chased by a wild animal, please let the fear kick in, fight or flight, and get the heck out of there, and don't let the tiger chew your leg off. But if it's you're fearful or worried about a situation, take a look at that and understand why you're afraid. And this is why I said, look at what the emotion is trying to tell you. Don't just think, oh, I'm afraid, I have to back away from it. Wild animal, yes, back away from it, go the other direction. Difficult situation with a really big opportunity to grow and maybe get to a better place in your life that you're kind of fearful or worried about, maybe that's worth walking towards and working through. And lots of the emotions are like this. Fear, frustration, sadness, excitement, we talked about those. They all signal certain things, and they all give us signals of which way they want us to go or which way we should be going in our lives. So how do we do this? How do we work with our emotion and not against them, right? How do we get there? We've talked a lot about what they could mean or what they couldn't mean, or how to we don't want to look at them as obstacles or dismiss them. But so how do we do this? How do we work with our emotions? We got to be buddies with our emotions, right? We're gonna arm in arm, link arms, hand in hand, and go happily towards things with our emotions. It sounds really great. It sounds happy, and it's difficult at first for sure. But acknowledge them. I think the biggest first step is to acknowledge your emotions without judgment. Don't label any emotion as good or bad. Simply acknowledge them as saying, this is what this emotion is. I feel anxious right now, without attaching a negative meaning to it or a positive. Just don't assign an emotion to it. Just say, I feel anxious right now, period, right? So when you do that, it gives you a chance to process it and think about the why rather than just giving into it and trying to resist it. Oh, I don't want to feel anxious. I don't want to be in this situation. I have to run. I have to leave. I have to go. Okay? The other thing is get really curious about what your emotions are trying to tell you. Ask yourself, when something presents itself and it fires in your gut and all of a sudden this feeling hits you like a ton of bricks, ask yourself, what's this trying to tell me? Why am I feeling this way? If anger shows up, maybe it's signaling that something's wrong. A boundary has been crossed, and you're angry about it and you say, nope, that's it. I'm angry now. But think about why you're angry and let the emotion tell you why it showed up. So they say the average emotion, I think, lasts 90 seconds. So in that 90 seconds, after that, it just starts to fade away. So I get that, we talked about controlled reactions. That's the episode before this. If you want more on that, go ahead and please listen to episode 10, The Power and the Triumph of Controlled Reactions. But let your emotions tell you what they're about and let them give you that good message. And also, once you look at them and say, hey, why did this emotion show up? Channel them productively. Now, you're probably saying, Todd, how do I channel negative emotions? Like, I don't think that's a good thing. I shouldn't be giving into them. But emotions, even the difficult ones, even the ones we want to push away and suppress, they contain lots of energy. Okay? And so you can use the energy that shows up. You can use it destructively by reacting impulsively, or you can use it constructively and fuel positive action. Instead of suppressing emotions, direct them. Give them a place to go. Use frustration to problem solve. If you're frustrated with something, figure out a way to make it so you don't have to deal with it anymore. Use fear to prepare. If you're scared or nervous for the job interview, let it push you to do some more preparation so that feeling starts to fade. And then use excitement to take action, to go out there and get it. If you're excited about something, go get it, run towards it, let the emotion build and let it fuel you and give you energy to keep going and keep walking and running towards that thing you love. And also remember, I just said that, the average emotion lasts about 90 seconds. Remember that emotions are temporary. No feeling will last forever. I know sometimes it feels that way, especially with big emotions, but emotions come in waves. They rise, they go up, they have this big giant peak, and then they fade and they start to fall and they start to, decrescendo, so to speak, and they start to go back down. And if you know this, that is huge in helping you navigate them more easily and understanding that you don't have to be consumed by your emotion. Give yourself the time to feel it and know that it's going to go up, it's going to get to this heightened peak, but then it's going to start to fade, and you can deal with that as it comes. And take comfort in knowing that it won't last forever. It's going to go back down. And I think we can wrap up on here. So I don't think you need to overcome your emotions to be productive, successful, happy, or overall just content with yourself or with your life. You don't have to remove them to move forward. That's not what you need to do at all. Instead, I think, remember, your emotions can be your greatest allies when you learn to work with them instead of fighting against them. Emotions are not obstacles. They're signposts. They point us towards what matters, where growth is needed, and how we can align our actions with our values, how we can get to where we want to be, how we can be the person we want to be. And so when we embrace them as part of the journey, we stop seeing them as roadblocks, and we can really start recognizing them as valuable tools for a richer and more authentic life. I appreciate your time here so very much. I appreciate you listening and tuning in. Thank you very much for all your time listening and all your time with me. If you have questions, comments about the podcast, if you'd like to work with me as a coach, if you'd like to ask me some advice, you can certainly reach out to me on social media. If you look hard enough, my email address is in there, and I am always happy to talk you through things like this. Thank you as always for listening. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in to Todd Talk. If you've liked what you've heard, please go ahead and subscribe and follow along so you don't miss any updates or new episodes. Thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day.